This is Alex Thompson, the national political correspondent for Axios and a political analyst at CNN. Recently, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Thompson was awarded the Aldo Beckman Award for overall excellence in White House coverage. Here's the award's presenter, Kristen Welker.
The judges said Thompson's aggressive reporting on President Biden, especially leading up to and after the Trump-Biden debate, revealed the president's cognitive decline was impacting his ability to do his job, information the White House tried to conceal.
Spoiler alert, you will be hard-pressed to find aggressive Biden White House reporting by Alex Thompson previous to the Trump-Biden debate. Or after, really. Take, for example, the two featured stories in the award graphic. This one was published after Biden dropped out, and this one about Biden's classified document scandal was published in February 2024. President Biden's team is concerned that special counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Biden's handling of classified documents will hurt his re-election campaign. This falls under the category of no shit. Of all the stories that they could have featured as an example of Thompson's reporting, this is the one that's supposed to represent the best of the best? Sure, okay. But here's some other examples of Thompson's work. Biden is reluctant to accept his old age, aides say. Scoop, Biden changes walking routine to Marine One. Man, that's what I call hard-hitting award-winning journalism. And remember this Biden moment back in June 2023?
I usually shake everybody's hand, but I'm going to stand in front of each section. No, I really mean it. And if you can see the camera, they can see you. And it's the least consequential part of this whole meeting for you, I promise. All right? God save the Queen, man.
So that was pretty bizarre, even for Joe Biden standards, and no one knew what Biden was referring to, considering that he was allegedly the president of a country that fought a war to gain its independence from the British monarchy. But Alex Thompson, award-winning journalist, wrote, Biden's weird words. President Biden often uses old-timey expressions that confound even his own staff. This happened again Friday when he ended a speech on gun violence with, God save the Queen, man. God save the Queen is an old-timey expression. I'm sorry, what? But Biden has been using unique phrases for years, but even some of his aides aren't exactly sure what he means by them. The White House didn't respond when Axios asked what Biden had meant. I mean, God forbid that Biden's staff ask him what the hell he meant. But I guess it's out of the question for some reason. Biden's quirky aphorisms are sometimes weaponized by Republicans to insinuate the 80-year-old president is in mental decline. Republicans were insinuating that Joe Biden was in mental decline? No. He was in mental decline. We were all pointing it out, literally for years.
Let me start off with two words. Made in America. Made in America. We have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know the average tax rate they pay? 8, EIGH%. 8%. And Joan Shingang, I'm going to pronounce it right, Shanga Kawawa. I think I pronounced it correctly. Look, folks, the idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
President Biden's decline and its cover-up by the people around him is a reminder that every White House, regardless of party, is capable of deception. Being truth tellers also means telling the truth about ourselves. We, myself included, missed a lot of this story, and some people trust us less because of it. We bear some responsibility for faith in the media being at such lows.
I'm sorry, but if you were a journalist covering the Biden administration and you claim to have missed the story, a story that was painfully obvious to everyone, then you need to quit and learn how to code or something.
I say this because acknowledging errors builds trust, and being defensive about them further erodes it. We should have done better.
Coulda, shoulda, didn't. And the thing is that most of the press didn't acknowledge that Joe Biden had any issues until after his disastrous debate performance.
What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened, I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
And it was only after 50 million people watched Joe Biden crash and burn in real time that the press was forced to actually report on Joe Biden's mental and physical health in a more honest and objective way. But up until that point, the media failed to do its job. They claimed that they missed the story, but the reality is they willingly ignored it.
This is not a media failure. This is a failure of the Democratic Party. And I just sort of the virtue signaling that some people have done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story. I just refuse to accept this stupid premise because it's a right-wing, manufactured right-wing premise in order to stain the media.
So Chuck Todd, formerly of NBC News, claims that it's not the media's fault. It's the Democrats and Republicans' fault. Makes sense to me. What's your problem?
By the way, why did the public think he was too old to be president? Did they come up with this on their own, or did they react to coverage of him?
Chuck Todd thinks that people are too stupid to have made that determination on their own. And I'd say that people determined that he was too old because they have eyes and ears.
I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
The media's got plenty of things to attack them for, and there are MSNBC and CNN and pundits that absolutely carried water for Joe Biden, but they're not journalists. They're former strategists that carried water for Joe Biden. It is just there were water carriers, but they're not real journalists. I refuse to accept the premise that what Jen Psaki was saying, no offense to her, but she's not a journalist. She's a former spokesperson for Joe Biden.
Chuck Todd claims that there wasn't a media failure, but then gives specific examples of two major media outlets who covered for Joe Biden. What the Chuck? And speaking of Jen Psaki, Ben Smith, editor-in-chief of Semaphore, asked the former press secretary about a cover-up by White House staff of Joe Biden's mental acuity.
Did the White House cover this up? Did the media cover this up? Like, what? Just sort of in retrospect, and you weren't in the White House in those later moments, but how do you read this? I mean, something I feel I have complicated feelings about, but I'm curious what you think.
I mean, I obviously do too. I think cover up is such a loaded phrase. But I also, to your point, I left in May of 2022, just for the facts here. I never saw that person, not a single time. And I was in the Oval Office every day that was on that debate stage.
So Joe Biden's appearance on the debate stage with Trump is easily the very worst event of his political career. Now, allow me to read back what Jen Psaki said. I never saw that person that was on the debate stage. She's not denying that she didn't see any decline. She's only stating that she didn't experience the level of decline that we all saw during the debate. But I would like to point out that a month after Psaki left the White House for a job at MSNBC, Joe Biden was spotted at a White House meeting holding a card with very specific instructions. You enter the Roosevelt Room and say hello to participants. You take your seat. You give brief comments. This was definitive proof that Biden was slipping. Almost 2 years prior to the 2024 debate, Ben Smith could have asked something like, "Be honest, Jen, did you see any decline during your year and a half working with Joe Biden?" But that didn't happen, of course. Instead, Ben and Jen quibbled over the definition of the term cover-up.
Your old colleagues, like, I mean, and you talk to these folks, I talk to these folks, like, do you think that were they actively covering it up? Were they sort of in denial? Or was that just a bad debate? Like, what is your read on that?
Well, this is what I mean about cover up is a very loaded term, I think.
Well, it means you knew that it was really bad and you're pretending otherwise versus you're deluding yourself, which I think is what people do a lot.
Well, I understand, but I still think it's like cover up is often like a crime, right? We're talking when people use that term.
They say it's worse
phrase.
than the crime.
A cover-up is an attempt to conceal evidence of wrongdoing, error, incompetence, or other embarrassing information. So no, it's not always an attempt to conceal a crime. But the Biden White House absolutely went out of their way to cover up Joe Biden's mental decline.
People use that term as they relate to Watergate or the covering up of not sharing public information about a war.
Yeah, and I'm not accusing anybody of a crime
I understand,
here,
but other people have used that term, and I think it's a bit of a dangerous term. I don't know. I have not talked to them. A lot of the people who are mentioned are good human beings. And so I like to think that, no, they would not be a part of an active, let's hide from the public what we see happening privately. And I don't know the facts of what was happening privately.
So Jen Psaki, who worked in both the Obama and Biden White Houses, hasn't discussed with any of her former coworkers about what was happening behind the scenes after she left. I'm sorry, but that's complete bullshit.
I think there's a consensus that the media generously missed and ungenerously covered up Joe Biden's frailty.
So for all the talk about how the media missed a story or could have done better, Ben Smith completely misses the mark by not pushing back against Jen Psaki or even asking a substantive follow-up. Translation? The media has learned absolutely nothing.
This is an attempt by some to virtue signal, and it's this horrible sort of pitting different news organizations against each other, when ultimately the people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. That is not a media failure. That is a Democratic Party failure.
In other words, Chuck Todd is blaming every Democrat in existence for the media's failure to objectively cover Joe Biden's mental decline. Yeah, that's what he's going with. And on that stupid note, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I hope to see you next time, if there is next time.